Tyler Bennett sat in his old pickup truck outside Miller's Diner, staring at the help-wanted ads he'd torn from the local newspaper. 3 weeks. That's how long it had been since Mrs. Rodriguez packed her bags and moved to Florida to live with her daughter. 3 weeks since his world turned upside down. The morning sun beat down on the cracked dashboard as Tyler rubbed his tired eyes. Running a cattle ranch in Montana was hard enough with help. Doing it alone while trying to care for his 7-year-old daughter Rose was proving impossible. "Daddy." "I'm hungry," Rose said from the passenger seat, her small voice cutting through his thoughts. "I know, sweetheart. We'll get some breakfast in a minute." Tyler folded the newspaper and looked at his daughter. Her blonde hair was tangled and there was a jam stain on her favorite blue dress. Mrs. Rodriguez would have never let her leave the house looking like that. The guilt hit him like a punch to the gut. Rose deserved better than cold cereal for dinner and mismatched socks. She deserved a stable home, not a father who was barely keeping his head above water. Tyler pushed open the diner door, the familiar smell of coffee and bacon greeting them. Miller's Diner had been the heart of their small town for as long as anyone could remember. The red vinyl booths and checkered floor hadn't changed since Tyler was Rose's age, coming here with his own father after church on Sundays. "Well, look who it is," called out Betty, the waitress who'd been working there since dinosaurs roamed the earth. "How you holding up, honey?" Tyler forced a smile. "Getting by, Betty, getting by." They slid into a corner booth and Tyler helped Rose color the kids' menu while they waited for their food. The diner was buzzing with its usual morning crowd, ranchers grabbing coffee before heading out to work, retired folks reading the paper over eggs and toast. That's when he heard the voice from the booth behind them. "I'm telling you, Martha, I don't know what I'm going to do with that girl." The voice was sharp, filled with frustration. "Ever since Robert died, she's been nothing but a burden. 18 years old and acts like she's still a child." Tyler tried not to listen, but the voice carried over the low murmur of the diner. "The bills keep piling up," the woman continued. "Robert left us with nothing but debt. The house payment, the credit cards, the medical bills from his cancer treatment, and now I've got his daughter eating me out of house and home, expecting me to take care of her like she's my responsibility." "Now, Carol," came another voice, gentler than the first. "Grace is just a girl. She lost her father." "She lost her father and I lost my husband," Carol snapped back. "But I'm the one stuck with the consequences. I swear, Martha, I'd pay someone to take her off my hands at this point. Maybe then I could get my life back on track." Tyler felt his stomach turn. He glanced at Rose, who was happily coloring a horse purple, completely unaware of the conversation happening behind them. "You don't mean that," Martha said. "Don't I? That girl doesn't appreciate anything I do for her. She mopes around the house, barely speaks to me, acts like I'm the villain. I cook, I clean, I work 2 jobs to keep a roof over our heads, and what do I get? Nothing but attitude and grocery bills." Tyler found himself turning slightly, catching a glimpse of the woman speaking. Carol Morrison, he recognized her now. She'd moved to town about 5 years ago when she married Robert Morrison, a quiet man who'd worked at the feed store. Tyler remembered seeing them together at church occasionally, Robert with his teenage daughter from his first marriage. "She's 18 now," Carol continued, "legally an adult. I don't owe her anything. Her mother died when she was little, and Robert spoiled her rotten. Never made her work, never taught her responsibility. Now she thinks the world owes her something." "What about school?" Martha asked. "Graduated last month. Keeps talking about college like money grows on trees. I told her if she wants to go to college, she can figure out how to pay for it herself." "I've got enough problems." Tyler's jaw tightened. He remembered being 18, remembered the dreams he'd had before life got complicated. His own father had supported those dreams, worked extra hours to help pay for Tyler's agricultural degree. It was that education that had helped him build his ranch into what it was today. "Besides," Carol went on, "what's she going to study? Art, literature? Useless stuff that won't pay the bills. She needs to learn how the real world works." Betty appeared at Tyler's table with their breakfast, but Tyler had lost his appetite. Rose dug into her pancakes, getting syrup on her fingers and chattering about the horses she'd colored. "Daddy, when are we going to get a new housekeeper?" Rose asked between bites. "I don't know, sweetheart. It's hard to find the right person." And it was. Mrs. Rodriguez had been perfect, kind, reliable, great with Rose. She'd treated the ranch like her own home and Rose like her own granddaughter. Finding someone to fill that role in a small Montana town wasn't easy. Most folks who were looking for work were either too young and inexperienced or had their own families to worry about. Tyler had interviewed 3 people in the past week. One woman seemed more interested in flirting with him than caring for Rose. Another wanted weekends off, which was impossible during calving season. The third had taken one look at the ranch's isolation and decided city life was more her style. "I wish Mrs. Rodriguez would come back," Rose said, her voice small. "Me too, honey. Me too." Behind them, Carol's voice had grown louder. "I'm serious, Martha. If someone offered to take her off my hands, I'd jump at the chance. Let someone else deal with her attitude and her unrealistic expectations." Something clicked in Tyler's mind. It was crazy, completely insane. But as he sat there watching Rose struggle to cut her pancakes, remembering the help wanted ads that had yielded nothing but disappointment, an idea began to form. He thought about the conversation he'd overheard. A young woman, 18 years old, recently graduated, apparently good with household tasks if she was helping Carol with cooking and cleaning. Someone who needed a fresh start, a chance to get away from a situation that wasn't working. Tyler had always been a problem solver. When the cattle got out, he found a way to fix the fence. When the truck broke down, he learned to repair it himself. When Rose needed him, he figured out how to be both father and mother. Maybe this was just another problem that needed a solution. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Stay here and finish your breakfast," he told Rose. "I'll be right back." Before he could lose his nerve, Tyler walked over to the other booth. Carol looked up at him with surprise, her fork halfway to her mouth. "Excuse me," Tyler said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation. I'm Tyler Bennett. I own the Diamond B Ranch just outside town." Carol's eyes narrowed slightly. "I know who you are. I understand you're having some difficulties with your stepdaughter," Tyler continued. "And I happen to have a situation myself. I'm looking for someone to help with housekeeping and childcare. Someone responsible and mature." Martha and Carol exchanged glances. Carol set down her fork. "What exactly are you suggesting, Mr. Bennett?" Tyler took a deep breath. This was it, the point of no return. "I'm suggesting we might be able to help each other out." Grace Morrison clutched her worn duffel bag tighter as Tyler's pickup truck bounced along, the dirt road leading to the Diamond B Ranch. Through the passenger window, she watched endless fields roll by, broken only by wooden fence posts and the occasional cluster of cattle. The silence in the truck was thick, broken only by the hum of the engine and the cheerful chatter of Rose in the back seat. "Are you really going to live with us?" Rose asked for the 3rd time since they'd left town. "For a while," Grace replied softly, not trusting her voice to say more. Everything had happened so fast. One moment she was washing dishes in Carol's kitchen, listening to her stepmother complain about money and responsibility. The next, this cowboy was sitting at their kitchen table, laying out an arrangement that sounded too good to be true. Tyler Bennett had offered to pay off all of Carol's debts, the mortgage, the credit cards, even the medical bills from her father's final months, in exchange for Grace coming to work at his ranch. Housekeeping, cooking, and helping care for his daughter. Room, board, and a fair wage on top of it. Carol had practically pushed Grace out the door. "There's the house," Tyler said, pointing ahead. Grace looked up to see a 2-story farmhouse with a wraparound porch painted white with blue shutters. It was nothing fancy, but it looked solid and well-maintained. Flower boxes hung under the windows, though they were empty now. A large red barn sat behind the house, and beyond that, she could see cattle dotting the pastures. "It's pretty," she said, surprised by the truth of her words. "My grandfather built it back in 1952, Tyler said with obvious pride. "Been in the family ever since." They pulled up to the house, and Tyler cut the engine. Grace sat for a moment, gathering her courage. She'd been working as Carol's unpaid servant for 3 years, ever since her father married the woman. Cooking, cleaning, taking care of the house while Carol worked her 2 jobs. But this felt different. This felt like stepping into the unknown. "You okay?" Tyler asked gently. Grace nodded and opened the truck door. The fresh mountain air hit her immediately, so different from the stale atmosphere of Carol's cramped house in town. She could hear birds chirping, cattle lowing in the distance, ants and the whisper of wind through the grass. "Let me show you around," Tyler said, grabbing her bag from the truck bed. Rose skipped ahead of them, her energy infectious. "This is the porch where we sit in the evenings. And that's Daddy's chair, but you can sit in the other one if you want." Tyler smiled at his daughter's enthusiasm. Rose let Grace catch her breath. "It's okay," Grace said quickly. "I like hearing about everything." The inside of the house was clean but clearly needed a woman's touch. The furniture was comfortable but mismatched, and there were dishes in the sink. Toys were scattered across the living room floor, and Grace could see dust on the shelves. "I know it's a mess," Tyler said, sounding embarrassed. Mrs. Rodriguez kept everything perfect, but since she left, he trailed off with a shrug. "It's not bad at all," Grace assured him, and she meant it. Compared to the tension-filled atmosphere of Carol's house, this place felt peaceful despite the clutter. "Your room is upstairs," Tyler said, leading the way. It was Mrs. Rodriguez's room. She said to tell whoever came next that the morning sun is beautiful from this window. He opened a door to reveal a simple but comfortable bedroom. There was a single bed with a colorful quilt, a dresser, and a small desk by the window. Grace walked over and looked out to see the barn and pastures stretching toward the mountains. "It's perfect," she whispered. Tyler set her bag on the bed. "The bathroom is right across the hall. You'll share it with Rose, but she's pretty good about keeping it clean." He paused at the doorway. "Grace, I want you to know something. This is your room now. You don't need permission to be here or to rest when you need to. You're not a guest, and you're not—" He seemed to search for the right words. "You're not a servant. You're part of this household now, okay?" Grace stared at him, not sure how to respond. In 3 years with Carol, she'd never had her own space, never been told she belonged anywhere. "Thank you," she managed to say. "Take some time to settle in," Tyler said. "Come down when you're ready and we'll go over everything." After he left, Grace sat on the edge of the bed and looked around the room. Sunlight streamed through the lace curtains, creating patterns on the wooden floor. She opened her duffel bag and pulled out her few belongings. Some clothes, a few books, and a photograph of her father. She set the picture on the nightstand and touched his face gently. "I hope this is the right choice, Dad," she whispered. Downstairs, she found Tyler in the kitchen making sandwiches while Rose sat at the table drawing. "Are you hungry?" he asked. "I was just making some lunch." "I can do that," Grace said quickly, moving toward the counter. "You just got here," Tyler said with a smile. "Sit down and relax," but Grace felt uncomfortable sitting idle. At Carol's house, there had always been something to do. Some way she was expected to earn her keep. She fidgeted with her hands, unsure of what was expected of her. "Tell me about yourself," Tyler said as he sliced tomatoes. "What do you like to do?" I like to read," Grace said carefully. "And I'm good at cooking. I took care of most of the meals at Carol's house." "What kind of books do you read?" Grace lit up slightly. "All kinds. I love stories about adventures and faraway places. I used to dream of traveling, seeing the world." She stopped, feeling foolish for admitting such things. "That sounds wonderful," Tyler said sincerely. "There's a whole library upstairs in the spare room. Feel free to read anything you want." Rose looked up from her drawing. "I can't read all the words yet, but I like picture books. Will you read to me sometime?" "I'd love to," Grace said, and for the first time in years, she found herself genuinely smiling. Over lunch, Tyler explained the daily routine. Rose caught the school bus at 7:30 each morning. Tyler was usually out working with the cattle by dawn, but he came in for lunch and was back by dinner time. Weekends were busier, especially during calving season. Mrs. Rodriguez always said the most important thing was making sure Rose felt loved and safe, Tyler said. Everything else is just details. Grace watched the little girl as she ate her sandwich, tomato sliding out the sides, completely unbothered by the mess. There was something so innocent and carefree about her, so different from the tense walking on eggshells atmosphere Grace was used to. "Can I help with the evening chores?" Grace asked. "I'd like to learn about the ranch." Tyler looked surprised. "You don't have to do that. The outside work is my job." "I want to," Grace said firmly. "I want to understand how everything works." That evening, Tyler showed her around the barn and introduced her to the horses. Grace was nervous at first. She'd never been around large animals. But Tyler was patient, showing her how to approach them calmly. "This is Buttercup," he said, patting a gentle mare. "She's Rose's favorite. And this old boy is Thunder. He's been with us for 15 years. Grace tentatively reached out to pet Thunder's nose. The horse snuffled gently at her hand and she laughed to spite herself. "He likes you." Rose said, appearing at Grace's elbow. He doesn't let just anyone pet him. As they walked back to the house in the fading daylight, Grace felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Tyler walked slightly ahead, pointing out different areas of the ranch and explaining the work that needed to be done. He spoke to her like her opinions mattered, like she was capable of understanding and contributing. Grace, Tyler said as they reached the porch steps, I know this is all new and probably overwhelming. If you ever need anything or if something doesn't feel right, I want you to tell me. Okay. Grace nodded, though she couldn't imagine what she might need. For the first time in 3 years, she had her own room, enough food and people who seemed genuinely glad she was there. Thank you, she said quietly, for all of this. Thank you, Tyler replied. I have a feeling you're exactly what this place needed. As Grace helped Rose get ready for bed that night, the little girl chattered about school and her friends and her favorite places on the ranch. When Grace tucked her in, Rose looked up at her with serious eyes. I'm glad you're here, Rose said simply. It feels more like home now. Grace's throat tightened with emotion. I'm glad I'm here too. Standing in the doorway of Rose's room, listening to Tyler read a bedtime story, Grace allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this could work. Maybe she'd finally found a place where she could belong. 3 weeks had passed since Grace arrived at the Diamond B Ranch, and Tyler found himself looking forward to something he hadn't expected, the sound of laughter echoing through his house again. It started small, a quiet giggle when Rose told a silly joke at breakfast, a soft chuckle when one of the barn cats knocked over a water bucket, but gradually Grace's smiles came easier, her shoulders relaxed and the worried lines around her eyes began to fade. Look, Grace. Look what I can do, Rose called out from the porch railing, where she was attempting to balance like a tightrope walker. Be careful, sweetheart, Grace called back, but she was smiling as she hung laundry on the line. The sight of white sheets dancing in the Montana breeze had become one of her favorite parts of the day. Tyler paused in brushing down thunder to watch the scene. Grace had transformed their daily routine without even trying. The house smelled like fresh bread and coffee instead of frozen dinners. Rose's hair was always neatly braided now, and her clothes were clean and pressed. But more than that, there was a warmth in the house that had been missing since his wife died. Tyler, Grace called out, breaking him from his thoughts. Rose wants to show you her new trick. He grinned and headed toward the house, leaving Thunder with a final pat. This had become their evening ritual. Grace would finish the indoor chores while Tyler completed his work with the animals, and then they'd all gather on the porch as the sun set behind the mountains. Watch this, Daddy. Rose scrambled down from the railing and proceeded to do 3 consecutive cartwheels across the porch, her blonde hair flying. That's amazing, Tyler applauded. When did you learn to do that? Grace taught me. She said she used to do gymnastics when she was little. Tyler looked at Grace with interest. Gymnastics? I wouldn't have guessed that. Grace blushed slightly. Just for a few years when I was Rose's age. My mom signed me up before she trailed off, but Tyler understood. Before she died, leaving Grace to grow up too fast? What else don't I know about you? Tyler asked, settling into his usual chair while Grace took the one beside him. Rose continued practicing her cartwheels in the yard. Not much to know, Grace said quietly. I doubt that. Tyler stretched his legs out, enjoying the cool evening air. What did you want to be when you grew up? Before everything got complicated? Grace was quiet for so long that Tyler thought she wasn't going to answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft and distant. A teacher. I wanted to teach little kids how to read. She smiled at Rose, who was now chasing fireflies in the growing dusk. I used to imagine having a classroom full of children, watching their faces light up when they understood a new word or finished their first book. You still could, Tyler said gently. Grace shook her head. That's just a silly dream. I need to be practical now. Dreams aren't silly, Tyler said firmly. My grandfather always told me that a person without dreams is like a horse without a rider. Might be moving, but doesn't know where it's going. Grace turned to look at him, surprised by the conviction in his voice. In the fading light, Tyler's face was kind but serious. She'd learned over the past weeks that he didn't speak carelessly. When he said something, he meant it. What about you? She asked. Did you always want to be a rancher? Tyler chuckled. Actually, no. I wanted to be a veterinarian. Spent 4 years studying animal science, had it all planned out. He paused, watching Rose catch a firefly in her cupped hands. Then my dad had his heart attack. Someone needed to run the ranch, and I was the only son. Sometimes life chooses your path for you. Do you ever regret it? Some days, Tyler admitted. But then I see Rose running through these fields like I did when I was her age, and I remember why this place matters. Family legacy isn't just about keeping land in your name. It's about preserving something good for the next generation. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Rose release her firefly and chase after another one. Grace found herself studying Tyler's profile, the strong jaw, the laugh lines around his eyes, the gentle way he watched his daughter. He was nothing like the rough, demanding man she'd expected when she first heard the term cowboy. Grace, look. Rose ran up to them, holding her cupped hands carefully. I caught 3. Don't keep them too long, Grace said softly. They need to be free to light up the sky. Rose nodded solemnly and opened her hands, watching the tiny lights blink away into the darkness. The peaceful routine continued for another week. Grace threw herself into ranch life with enthusiasm that surprised everyone, including herself. She learned to collect eggs from the chickens, helped Tyler with the bookkeeping, and even assisted with feeding the cattle. Her favorite time was the early morning, when she'd stand in the kitchen with her coffee and watch the sun rise over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. But their growing contentment was shattered on a Thursday night when Rose woke up burning with fever. Daddy, she whimpered from her bedroom doorway, swaying on her feet. I don't feel good. Tyler scooped her up immediately, feeling the heat radiating from her small body. Grace appeared at his shoulder, still in her nightgown but instantly alert. How high is her temperature? Grace asked, already reaching for the thermometer from the medicine cabinet. 104. Tyler read, his voice tight with worry. We need to get her to the hospital. No hospital, Rose cried weakly. I want to stay home. The next 3 days blurred together in a haze of worry, medicine schedules, and sleepless nights. The doctor diagnosed pneumonia and prescribed antibiotics, but Rose's fever remained dangerously high. Tyler took shifts sitting by her bedside, but it was Grace who rarely left the child's room. She read story after story in a soft voice, placed cool cloths on Rose's forehead, and somehow managed to coax small sips of water and broth into the sick little girl. When Rose cried for her mother, something she hadn't done in months, Grace held her gently and hummed lullabies until the child fell into an exhausted sleep. Tyler found himself watching Grace with growing amazement. She moved through the crisis with a quiet strength that reminded him of his own mother. There was no drama, no complaints about lost sleep or the constant demands of caring for a sick child. Grace simply did what needed to be done with a competence that seemed far beyond her 19 years. On the third night, Tyler woke from a brief nap in his chair to find Grace sitting on the edge of Rose's bed, gently stroking the child's hair. Rose's breathing was easier and her fever had finally broken. How is she? Tyler whispered. Better, Grace said softly, not taking her eyes off Rose. Her temperature is down to 99. I think she's going to be okay. Tyler felt a weight lift from his chest that he hadn't realized was there. Grace, I can't thank you enough. What you've done these past few days, and she's a special little girl, Grace said simply. She deserves to be taken care of. In that moment, looking at Grace's tired but peaceful face in the lamplight, Tyler felt something shift inside his chest. It wasn't just gratitude anymore, though that was certainly part of it. It was something deeper, more complex, something that had been growing quietly over the past weeks as he watched Grace transform from a frightened girl into the heart of his household. You both are, he said quietly. Special, I mean. Grace looked up at him then, and something passed between them in the quiet room. An understanding, a recognition that their relationship had moved beyond employer and employee somewhere along the way. Rose stirred in her sleep, mumbling something about horses and fireflies. Grace smoothed the blanket around her shoulders with infinite tenderness. She's dreaming about the ranch, Grace whispered. This is her home, Tyler said. Mine too, Grace replied softly, and Tyler knew she meant it in every sense of the word. When Rose woke the next morning asking for pancakes, Tyler knew they'd turned the corner. But more than his daughter's recovery, he realized that somewhere in those 3 difficult days his little family had become complete in a way he'd never expected. Grace wasn't just their housekeeper anymore. She was home. Spring arrived at the Diamond B Ranch like a gentle promise kept. The harsh Montana winter finally loosened its grip, and Grace found herself marveling at the transformation around her. Wildflowers dotted the pastures, newborn calves wobbled beside their mothers, and the morning air carried the sweet scent of fresh grass and possibility. She'd been at the ranch for 4 months now, and the frightened girl who'd arrived with nothing but a duffel bag felt like a distant memory. Grace had found her rhythm in this place. Morning coffee watching the sunrise, afternoons helping Tyler with ranch work, evenings on the porch with Rose chattering about her day at school. What she hadn't expected was how natural it would feel to be part of Tyler's world, or how difficult it was becoming to ignore the way her heart raced when he smiled at her. "Grace, come quick." Rose's excited voice carried across the yard. "The baby goats are trying to climb on their mama." Grace laughed and hurried toward the barn, where Tyler was leaning against the fence watching the newest additions to their small goat herd. 3 kids, barely a week old, were indeed attempting to scale their patient mother's back. "They're going to be trouble," Tyler said with a grin as Grace joined him at the fence. "The best kind of trouble," Grace replied, watching the playful babies tumble over each other. Tyler glanced at her, noting the easy smile on her face and the way the spring sunshine brought out the gold highlights in her brown hair. 4 months ago, she'd barely spoken above a whisper. Now she laughed freely, offered opinions on ranch decisions, and had become the heart of their daily life. "Grace," he said suddenly. "What day is it?" "Wednesday, April 15th. Why?" Tyler's face broke into a wide smile. "April 15th. That means tomorrow is April 16th. Grace looked confused. "Yes, that's usually how dates work." "Your birthday," Tyler said gently. "Rose mentioned it last week. Tomorrow is your 19th birthday." Grace's smile faded slightly. "Oh, I guess I'd forgotten." "Forgotten your own birthday?" "Carol never celebrated it," Grace said with a shrug that tried to look casual. "After Dad died, it just became another day." Tyler felt a familiar surge of anger toward Carol Morrison, but he kept his voice calm. "Well, we celebrate birthdays around here. Rose is already planning something, so don't even think about trying to stop her." That evening, after Rose had gone to bed, Grace found Tyler on the porch as usual, but instead of settling into her chair, she remained standing, fidgeting with the hem of her sweater. "You really don't need to make a fuss about tomorrow," she said quietly. I don't need anything special." Tyler studied her face in the lamplight. "Grace, when's the last time someone did something nice for you just because they wanted to?" The question caught her off guard. She thought about it seriously, going back through years of memories. "My dad used to bring me flowers from the garden on my birthday. Little wildflowers in a mason jar." Her voice grew soft. "I was 14 when he last did that." "That's too long," Tyler said firmly. "Everyone deserves to feel special on their birthday." Grace finally sat down, but she was still tense. "Tyler, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest. Always. Are you happy with how things are working out? With me being here, I mean. Because if I'm not doing enough, or if you need someone with more experience—" "Grace, stop." Tyler turned to face her fully. "What brought this on?" I know this arrangement was supposed to be temporary, a solution to both our problems, but I've been here 4 months now, and sometimes I worry that I'm taking advantage of your kindness, that maybe I should be looking for something more permanent, somewhere else." Tyler was quiet for a long moment. The truth was, he couldn't imagine the ranch without Grace anymore. She'd become essential to his daily life in ways that went far beyond housekeeping and childcare. But he also knew their situation was complicated. She was young, talented, and deserved every opportunity in the world. What right did he have to want her to stay? "Grace, I want you to know something," he said finally. "You're not taking advantage of anything. You've given Rose and me something we didn't even know we were missing. This place feels like a real home again because of you." Grace felt her throat tighten with emotion. "It feels like home to me too." "That's what scares me." "Why does that scare you?" "Because good things don't last for me," she whispered. "My mom died when I was 8. My dad died when I was 16. Carol made it clear I was a burden. I'm afraid to get too comfortable here because what happens when you decide you don't need me anymore?" Tyler's heart ached for her. "Grace, look at me." She raised her eyes to meet his. "You're not going anywhere unless you want to. This is your home for as long as you want it to be. I promise you that." The sincerity in his voice made Grace's eyes fill with tears. Why are you so good to me? Tyler reached over and gently took her hand. Because you deserve goodness. You deserve to be valued and appreciated and cared for. Any man lucky enough to have you in his life should spend every day making sure you know how special you are. The words hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning that neither was quite ready to acknowledge. Grace stared at their joined hands, feeling her heart pound. Tyler, she began, but was interrupted by the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. They both looked up in surprise. It was nearly 9 o'clock, and they rarely had visitors, especially not unannounced ones. Tyler stood as the car door slammed shut, and Grace felt her blood run cold as a familiar figure emerged from the shadows. Carol, she breathed. Carol Morrison marched up to the porch with the same sharp energy Grace remembered so well. She looked older, harder somehow, and her eyes were filled with anger. Well, Carol said, looking between Tyler and Grace. Isn't this cozy? Mrs. Morrison, Tyler said evenly. What brings you out here so late? I think you know exactly what brings me here, Carol snapped. I've been hearing things in town. People talking about how you're living out here with an 18-year-old girl. How convenient that must be for you. Grace stood up quickly, her face burning with embarrassment. Carol, it's not like that. I work here. I take care of Rose and help with the house. Oh, I'm sure you do, Carol said with a nasty smile. And I'm sure Mr. Bennett appreciates all your help. Tyler's jaw tightened. That's enough. Grace is a member of this household and deserves your respect. Respect? Carol laughed harshly. For a girl who's been playing house with a man nearly twice her age? Do you know what people in town are saying? They're calling her all sorts of names, and frankly, I don't blame them. Grace felt like she'd been slapped. What do you want, Carol? I want you to come home where you belong. This little fantasy you're living is over. You're making a fool of yourself and embarrassing our family name. Our family name? Grace's voice rose with anger. You couldn't wait to get rid of me 4 months ago. That was before I realized how this would look, Carol shot back. A young girl living alone with a widower and his child? It's inappropriate, and it's going to stop. Tyler stepped forward, his voice deadly calm. Grace is 19 years old and perfectly capable of making her own decisions about where she lives and works. Is she? Carol's eyes glittered with malice. Because from where I stand, it looks like you've taken advantage of a desperate young woman. Isolated her out here, made her dependent on you. What would people say if they knew the real story of how this arrangement started? The threat hung in the air like a poisonous cloud. Grace felt her world tilting, all the security and happiness she'd found at the ranch suddenly feeling fragile and threatened. Get off my property, Tyler said quietly. Carol smiled triumphantly. I'll be back tomorrow, Grace, and you'd better be ready to come home with me, because if you're not, I'll make sure everyone in this county knows exactly what kind of man Tyler Bennett really is. She turned and walked back to her car, leaving Grace and Tyler standing in the wreckage of their peaceful evening. After Carol's taillights disappeared into the darkness, Grace sank into her chair, her hands shaking. I have to go with her, she said quietly. No, Tyler said firmly. You don't have to do anything. You don't understand. She'll ruin you. She'll make up stories, tell everyone that we... Grace couldn't finish the sentence. Tyler knelt beside her chair and took her hands in his. Grace, listen to me. I don't care what Carol Morrison says or thinks. I care about you, about what you want, about what makes you happy. Grace looked into his eyes and saw something there that made her breath catch. Tyler, I love you, he said simply. I know the timing is wrong and the situation is complicated, but I can't pretend anymore. I love you, and not just because you take care of Rose or keep house. I love your kindness, your strength, your laugh, the way you see beauty in everything around you. I love who you are. Grace felt tears spill down her cheeks. I love you too. I've loved you for weeks, but I was afraid to say it. Afraid you'd think I was just grateful or confused. Tyler cupped her face gently. And now I'm terrified, Grace whispered. Because loving you means I have everything to lose. The next morning, Grace woke before dawn with knots in her stomach. Carol's threats echoed in her mind, and the memory of Tyler's confession felt like both a blessing and a curse. She loved him, had loved him for months, but loving someone meant protecting them, even from herself. She found Tyler already in the kitchen, making coffee with the focused intensity of a man who hadn't slept. He looked up when she entered, his eyes searching her face. How are you feeling? He asked gently. Scared, Grace admitted. Tyler, maybe Carol is right. Maybe I should go back with her before this gets worse. No. Tyler's voice was firm. We're not making decisions based on fear or threats. We're going to handle this the right way. What's the right way? Before Tyler could answer, Rose appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas but wide awake. Why is everyone up so early? And why does Grace look sad? Today is her birthday. Tyler and Grace exchanged glances. They'd both forgotten about the birthday plans and the chaos of the previous evening. I'm not sad, sweetheart, Grace said, forcing a smile. Just a little tired. Well, you can't be tired on your birthday, Rose declared with the logic of an 8-year-old. Today is going to be the best day ever. Despite everything, Grace found herself genuinely smiling. Rose's enthusiasm was infectious, and for a moment, the weight of Carol's threats seemed to lift. The morning passed quietly. Tyler went about his usual chores while Grace helped Rose with a secret birthday project that involved construction paper, glitter, and a great deal of concentration. Around noon, Grace noticed several cars pulling into the driveway. Tyler, she called out, anxiety creeping back into her voice. We have visitors. Tyler came around from the barn, wiping his hands on his jeans. Grace was surprised to see him smile when he recognized the vehicles. It's okay, he said, walking over to her. I asked them to come. Asked who? The answer came as people began emerging from the cars. Betty from the diner along with her husband Bob, Dr. Martinez, who had treated Rose during her pneumonia, the pastor from the local church along with his wife, even old Mr. Thompson who ran the feed store. Grace felt confused and overwhelmed. Tyler, what's going on? You'll see, he said softly, taking her hand. Betty approached them first, carrying a covered dish and wearing a warm smile. Happy birthday, honey, she said to Grace. We brought lunch to celebrate. Dr. Martinez stepped forward next. Grace, I wanted to thank you again for how you cared for Rose during her illness. Tyler tells me you barely left her side for 3 days. Any mother would have done the same, Grace said quietly, then blushed when she realized what she'd said. Exactly, said Pastor Williams with a knowing smile. Any mother would. More people arrived throughout the afternoon. Neighbors Grace had met at the general store. Parents of Rose's school friends. Even the mailman stopped by to wish her well. Grace found herself surrounded by people who seemed genuinely happy to see her, who spoke of her kindness to Rose and her help around the community. As the afternoon wore on, Grace began to understand what Tyler had done. He'd invited everyone who mattered in their small community to celebrate her birthday, to show that she wasn't some isolated girl being taken advantage of, but a valued member of their town. You planned all this, Grace said to Tyler as they watched Rose show off her cartwheels to an appreciative audience. I wanted you to see how people really feel about you, Tyler replied. Carol Morrison doesn't speak for this community. You do belong here, Grace, not just with me and Rose, but here in this place. Just as the sun was beginning to set and people were starting to think about heading home, another car pulled into the driveway. Grace's heart sank as she recognized Carol's vehicle. Carol got out of her car and surveyed the scene with obvious displeasure. Her plan to quietly collect Grace had been complicated by the presence of half the town. What's all this? Carol demanded, marching up to Tyler. A birthday party, Tyler said calmly. Grace is 19 today. I can see that. Carol's voice was sharp. Grace, get your things. We're leaving. The conversations around them gradually stopped as people sensed the tension. Grace felt every eye on her, waiting to see what she would do. I'm not going anywhere, Grace said quietly. Excuse me? Grace stepped closer to Tyler, drawing strength from his presence. I said I'm not going anywhere. This is my home. Carol's face flushed with anger. Don't be ridiculous. You can't stay here indefinitely, playing house with a man old enough to be your father. Tyler is only 36, Grace said, her voice growing stronger. And we're not playing house. We're building a life together. A life? Carol laughed harshly. What kind of life can you have here? You're wasting yourself. On some cowboy when you could be making something of yourself. I am making something of myself, Grace replied firmly. I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm helping raise a wonderful little girl, and I'm loved. Really loved for the first time since my father died. Rose, who had been watching from nearby, suddenly ran over and wrapped her arms around Grace's waist. Grace is going to be my new mom, she announced loudly. Daddy said so. Tyler looked startled. Rose, I didn't exactly. You said you loved her, Rose said matter-of-factly. And she loves you back. And she loves me. That makes her my mom. Grace knelt down to Rose's level. "Sweetheart, it's not quite that simple." "Why not?" Rose asked with 8-year-old logic. "Love is love, right?" Dr. Martinez stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Actually, if I may," he said in his gentle voice, "I've been watching this young woman for months now. I've seen how she cares for Rose, how she's contributed to this community, how she's blossomed under Tyler's care and protection. What I see is a family that was meant to be." "Hear, hear," called out Betty from the crowd. Pastor Williams nodded his agreement. "Grace has shown nothing but kindness and maturity in all her interactions with our community. Tyler is a good man who's provided her with a safe, loving home. I see no impropriety here, only love." Carol looked around at the sea of supportive faces and realized her threats carried no weight with these people. They knew Tyler's character, and they'd come to know Grace's as well. "This is ridiculous," Carol sputtered. "She's just a girl. She's a young woman who's been through more hardship than most people twice her age," Tyler said firmly. "And she's shown more grace and strength than anyone I've ever known. I'm proud to love her, and I'm not ashamed of it." Grace felt tears of happiness prick her eyes. Around them, people began to clap and cheer. Carol, seeing she was outnumbered and outmaneuvered, threw up her hands in disgust. "Fine, ruin your lives. See if I care." She stalked back to her car and drove away, leaving a cloud of dust and defeated anger behind her. As the crowd began to disperse, people stopped to hug Grace and congratulate Tyler. Rose danced around them, delighted that her family was complete. When the last guest had left, Tyler, Grace, and Rose sat on the porch in the gathering darkness. Rose had finally exhausted herself and was curled up between them, fast asleep. "So," Tyler said softly, "Rose thinks we should get married." Grace laughed quietly. "She's pretty sure about that, isn't she? She's a smart kid. Takes after her dad." Tyler grinned. "What do you think?" "I think," Grace said slowly, "that I've never been happier than I am right here, right now. I think I want to wake up every morning for the rest of my life, watching the sun rise over these mountains. I think I want to help Rose with her homework and teach her to braid her hair and be there when she graduates high school." "And what about college?" Tyler asked. "Your dreams of being a teacher?" Grace smiled. "I've been thinking about that. There's a community college in Billings that offers education courses online. I could get my degree while still being here for Rose. Maybe eventually teach at the elementary school in town." "You've got it all figured out." "We've got it all figured out," Grace corrected. "This is a partnership, remember?" Tyler leaned over and kissed her softly. "Happy birthday, Grace. Best birthday of my life," she whispered back. 1 year later, Grace stood in the same spot where Tyler had first confessed his love. But this time she was wearing a simple white dress and holding a bouquet of wildflowers that Rose had picked that morning. The mountains provided a perfect backdrop, as Pastor Williams pronounced them, husband and wife. Rose, dressed in yellow and carrying a basket of flower petals, cheered louder than anyone when they kissed. 3 years after that, Grace graduated with her teaching degree, 6 months pregnant with their first child together. She started teaching 3rd grade at the local elementary school, coming home each day to a ranch that thrived under their joint care, and a family that had grown to include not just their new baby, but several foster children they'd taken in over the years. The Diamond B Ranch had become exactly what Tyler's grandfather had envisioned, a place where family legacy was preserved, not just in land and cattle, but in love, second chances, and the unshakable belief that sometimes the most broken people can build the strongest homes. Grace never forgot the frightened girl who had arrived with nothing but a duffel bag and a wounded heart. But she also never doubted that finding Tyler and Rose, and being found by them in return, was the greatest gift life had ever given her. Love, it turned out, was indeed the answer to everything.